Hello gamers, it is the 28th of February 2021 and this time we're playing Volley and Bayonet Road to Glory rules in 6mm, but we're playing a battle from the First Silesian War. We have Frederick the Great with Prussia against the Austrians. The Battle of Mollwitz. Now you have to use your imagination here because the actual battlefield, which was fought on the 10th of April 1741, the actual battlefield was covered in moderate snow. So bear that in mind, as it were. We've got the Prussian army is here, and we have the Austrian army over here. These are historical deployments. It's not as if the player has had a lot of choice in determining who goes where. It's pretty strictly historical deployments, and this is using the scenario, just looking at my notes here, that was designed by Andrew Nichol with some editing by Keith McNally. And is available free download from Volley and Bayonet sites out there on the internet. So going straight into the topography of the battlefield, we can see that there are actually no hills involved, which makes it easier to set up from the point of view of the wargamer. It's a small battlefield. The full-scale Volley and Bayonet battlefield would be 4 feet square, 4 feet on each side of the square. I'm playing in the centimetre scale, so of course each side, for example, a side like this, there we go, up to the corner. The edge, instead of being 48 inches, is 48 centimetres, so very much more compact. We have a flat battlefield, with some features, not a lot. Right, we've got two what Volley and Bayonet call villages. So we have Hermsdorf here and Gruningen here. And then we have two towns. We have Pampitz down here, and then we have Mollwitz itself over here, with the Austrians arrayed in front of it. There are on the map in the notes that come with the scenario, there are some tracks that are of no military value, so I have not put them onto the battlefield. But we do have two marshy streams, which are very important. We hit the longer one that's involved with our battlefield here is this one here, which is the Kleiner Bach, and then we have a little bit of this one here running down there, down to Pampitz, and that is the Konrads Waldauer Bach. Good tongue twister, that one. And as far as the topography goes, that is it. So now we'll move on and take a look at the forces involved. Okay, so as to the forces, we have the Austrian army. And as an aside here, I will say that what I've done here is I've used representative forces from the 18th century. The Prussian forces are pretty much Prussians, but on the other side here, we basically have troops which are mainly dressed in white uniforms, and there's a little bit of red, there's quite a bit of red around in there as well, but so I wouldn't use this as a history lesson in terms of the uniforms, but let's just say you get the idea. So we have the Austrians, and in the overall organization of the Austrians, we have the left-wing cavalry, we have the first-line infantry, the second-line infantry, and we have the right-wing cavalry. In terms of the command structure, the Austrian army commander is over here. We have Feldmarschall Wilhelm Reinhard von Neipperg. Then we have the left-wing cavalry over here, which is commanded by Karl von Römer. Then we have the first-line infantry, which is commanded here by Feldmarschall Lieutenant Braun. And finally, is it finally? Wait a minute, I'm losing track. Okay, here we go. We have the second line infantry here, which is commanded by Count Kolovrat. And then the right-wing cavalry, which is commanded by von Berlichingen, much as you might imagine. So those are the Austrians, and we'll get to the tactical situation in just a moment, but that's their order of battle. And let's take a look at the Prussians. The overall organization of the Prussian army is that we have the right-wing cavalry here. We have the first-line infantry here, the second-line infantry here, and then finally we have the left-wing cavalry down here. In terms of commanders, this is an interesting situation because in this battle, one of the things that happened relatively early in the battle was that things got very sticky on the Prussian right, and let's see, I believe it was actually von Schwerin, who's over here at the moment, advised Frederick to retire from the battlefield for his own safety. So Frederick is not present. There is no Prussian army commander, and instead we have, okay, if we go down the line on the right-wing cavalry here, we have, we have Count von der Schulenburg. Then we come to Feldmarschall Graf von Schwerin, who is the corps commander. Then we have the first line infantry, which is commanded by von der Mollwitz. Then we have the second line infantry, which in the scenario notes is commanded by an unknown commander. So there he is, the division commander 2. And then over here we have the left-wing cavalry, which is commanded by von Posadowski. We have an interesting situation here in that apparently the deployment of the Prussian units got a bit tangled up in this region here. So we actually have an infantry unit down here amongst the cavalry, and we also have this infantry unit here, which is at right angles to the other units. We also have a field artillery battalion out in front, but that's a good place for it to be. So that's what's going on there, and the field artillery belongs to the first line of the infantry. So that is the Prussian order of battle and deployment. As to the battle length, the battle starts at 2 p.m. and runs to 7 p.m. inclusive. So that gives us a total of 6 turns. So it's not a long battle. And as to the victory conditions, I'll actually read this straight from the scenario notes. The Prussians have to defeat the Austrian army and or take the town of Mollwitz, which is here. If the Austrian packs Mollwitz with his second line, that is to say his second line, and everything else gets beaten, it was decided that the day should be awarded to the Prussians. The Austrians only have to avoid a Prussian victory. Now, one of the reasons I make these videos is, apart from just enjoying making a journal of how the battle unfolded and then being able to look back on that years later, fond memories, that sort of thing, it also helps me if I'm going to play the game after not having played it for a very long time. It gives me a sort of a jump on a kickstart on how to get the game back into my head, as it were, because in my experience, there's nothing better than actually watching a game unfold to jog the old grey cells in terms of how to play it again. One thing I did want to note then was that because now we're back in the 18th century, as opposed to the game of Quatre Bras, which was played recently, which of course was 1815. So here we've got different types of units in the sense of we've got all the infantry is linear. And that means, as far as I have played several of these games, but it's been a long time, 20 years since I played. I think close to 20 years since I played linear units. And the key thing is that the firepower is actually the same as with massed units, in the sense that you're going to have a firepower of 2 dice if you're normal, and 4 dice if you're stationary. And then, of course, onto that can be added one more for dedicated guns, of course. But the firepower is the same for linear and for mass. Now, the difference is in melee, which on massed would be 4 and 6 dice if it was normal or stationary. But on linear infantry, it's 3 dice for melee if normal, and 5 dice for melee if stationary. So firepower the same, melee not as strong. The other of course big difference is going to be that interesting thing on the order of battle. I've looked at it, and essentially in general, every infantry unit and almost every cavalry unit, half the cavalry units are 2 strength points, but all the infantry units have the same. Let me just check this. Have the same number of strength points. I'm pretty sure they do here, and so that's very much unlike. Let me just check that. Just a second. Very high production quality here, obviously. Yeah, all the infantry units are worth 2 strength points. Several cavalry units are 2 strength points as well, but some of the cavalry are beefier than that and are worth 3 strength points. So. It doesn't take many hits, of course, to get rid of a unit then if it's only 2 strength points. In terms of differences between the Austrians and the Prussians, the key thing, as was the case historically, of course, is that the Prussian left-wing cavalry here is very good. We can expect it to make great progress here against the Prussian right-wing cavalry if they so decide, which they probably will. And the Prussian cavalry is, generally speaking, not very good. So this cavalry, as I recall, is particularly good. This cavalry is certainly workmanlike. Yes, good. Then the difference with the infantry is that basically all the Prussian infantry is really great, and all the Austrian infantry is less than average. What do we really mean by that? The morale of the Prussian infantry is, as far as I could see, 6 across the board, and the morale of the Austrian infantry is almost without exception 4. So there's one unit right here, right there, there's one unit that is not 4, and that's a 5 morale there. So we would expect that the Prussian infantry will do a great deal of damage against the Austrian infantry. Now, of course, there is a big point, though, tactically, and that is to say that the Prussians have to attack in order to win the battle. The Austrians, of course, are in a position where they can remain stationary. So if the Austrians are stationary, they may have a morale of 4, but they are stationary. Or rather, if they choose to be stationary for tactical reasons, then they will, of course, have a big advantage over the Prussians, who are slogging their way through the moderate snow, which we have to imagine on the battlefield, as they close into contact. And there we are. All infantry units have got dedicated guns. All Austrians have got elites present, and the Prussians do not have elites present. Let's see, what else can we think of? I really think there's only one more thing to mention, and that is that the battle is simplicity itself, in the sense that there are no reinforcements whatsoever. This is your lot, so make it work with this lot or fail. And I think with that, we're probably, you'll be pleased to hear, ready to start the ball. So here we are at the end of the Austrian 2 p.m. turn, their first turn, and they have taken decisive action. Following history, the Austrian left-wing cavalry has shot around the extreme right flank of the Prussian forces, and then, just in a general description of the situation, they've also decided to take their right-wing cavalry in a bold move up the back of their army, and they're presumably going to be sending them in this direction as well, and then using their second line infantry to complete the line down here to the Kleiner Bach. Specifically, as we went through the turn then in Volley and Bayonet, we checked command. Everybody was in command, plenty of commanders around. Then in terms of the movement, it has to be remembered that, let's see, the infantry can move 1,600 yards, okay? And then we've got cavalry, which the faster cavalry can move 2,400 yards, and the slower cuirassier can move 2,000 yards. So it was pretty easy for the two brigades from this one remained in place. The two brigades from here moved up to here. So they had a free facing change, moved over here, and then did another facing change. So they moved half their distance over here because the second facing change took up half their turn. They are in and amongst the small number of buildings in this village here. It's of no consequence. It doesn't get in their way, so they because it's a village, so they are just parked there. And this means that now they can, this unit here certainly can attack this unit in the flank if it's not facing it. In the next turn, we'll see what happens, we'll see what the Prussians do. As I say, this unit remained in situ, and the commander, Römer, has moved up so to keep everybody in command. Then we have the dragoons, cuirassier, and more dragoons coming up here from von Berlichingen. There's a tongue twister. And so they've shot up here. Basically, they were able to make one facing change down here and then go straight forward up to here. We're using these markers to indicate that all these units are stationary. So, of course, that gives them a big bonus. There was no need to move them. It's incumbent upon the Prussians to attack. And then these units here had plenty of move to be able to move down to complete the line down to the marshy stream, the Kleiner Bach. And now, of course, they've got facing them, or in that region at least, they've got the Prussian left-wing cavalry. But the way that the marshy streams work is that a stream will cost you half your movement to cross it. And if it's a marshy stream, then it's going to disorder you. So the cavalry have got problems. I mean, it's not like they can't attack the infantry, but they do. They certainly have issues down there. It's not the easy peasy thing it would be to do if there were no marshy stream down there. In terms of, so we had the movement. There was nothing to rally, of course, at this stage in the battle. We move on to morale tests. There were no morale tests because nobody is in melee and nobody is in close range. The Prussian artillery is here and it is in range of the Austrians, but it's not in close range. So there was no morale tests called there. Then when we went on to combat, there's no melee, and no one is within range, except although the field artillery battalion here is within range, it's in long range, and because They are what Volley and Bayonet calls a defender. When the Austrians are moving, the Prussians are the defender. They're the non-phasing player, as we might say. And the non-phasing player or the defender only gets to fire at people that aren't attacking them if they are at close range. And they're not at close range. Close range for them would be 400 yards, which is 4 centimeters on this table. Anyway, they're beyond that, so there was no fire. So yes, so in terms of the overall situation, the Prussians will have observed, okay, Austrians are staying put. They've taken their cavalry in a bold move from here and shot it up here to their left flank, and they filled in the gap with their second line units here. So that's what we've got for the Austrian first turn, which was the 2 p.m. turn. And here we are at the end of the Prussian first turn, 2 p.m. And we can see that we've already had some excitement down on the Prussian right. To go through the turn, the Prussians started out without any command problems, plenty of commanders all ready to hand, and so we moved on to movement. It was decided by von Posadowski down here with his left-wing cavalry that because the Austrians had decided to move their cavalry from this wing down to be handy to assault the Prussian right, there was no need for his cavalry to remain down here, so therefore they were also going to go around basically the rear of their forces and up to the Prussian right to help out up there. So they've crossed the marshy stream, and they have reformed over here, recovered from disorder, and are ready to move off in the next turn. The infantry, all of which is stationary up here. The second line is also stationary. I actually didn't bother marking it because it's fairly self-evident, and I'm only playing by myself, so that's not a problem. So everybody's stationary. And the main reason for this was, although the lines could have moved forward, they didn't want to be moving forward until they had some idea of what was going to be going on their flank here. And it's all very much up in the air over there right now. Not looking good for the Prussians on the flank there. And the other thing too, of course, was that if they move forward, that means that they could have moved directly, they're close enough that they could have moved directly into contact with the Austrians. But the Austrians, although they're of a lower morale, they're all stationary, or they're almost all stationary. So big advantage there for the Austrians. The other thing too, though, is that if the Prussians had instead perhaps moved part of the way forward and halted, the Prussians obviously would not have been stationary at that point. And an extremely important thing, which is easy to miss, is that in the Volley and Bayonet rules, in general circumstances, forces, when they're moving, they can pass through friends without issue. That means even when charging into contact. So that means, for example, that if the Prussian line had moved forward, perhaps, I don't know, to a position like this, it could have been charged by these cavalry brigades back here who could have moved directly through their friends and into contact with the enemy. So it's a very important thing there to consider, because otherwise one might look at this and figure, well, these units are going to have to go around the end in order to be able to attack somebody down here. But no. The reason for this is that, of course, the individual bases on which the troops are based basically represent a zone of control, as it were, a zone of occupation. I don't want to call it a zone of control because that's a technical term in the Volley and Bayonet rules. So it's an overall zone of occupation that the troops are controlling or occupying, and there are gaps and so forth. So therefore the cavalry, for example, would be able to move in between units and go right through them and attack an enemy on the other side of the friends. Okay, so the Prussian infantry has decided to sit tight, figure out what's going on the flank first, and then the bold move was made by, Count von der Schulenburg here, who decided to use the two, let's see, what do we got here? Decided to use the two cavalry brigades rather than sit around and be assaulted as they were about to be by the Austrian, who were flanking them, coming down here, flanking them, and also had this brigade here ready to charge in on the next turn. Rather than that, decided to go on the offensive, and when in doubt, charge. And one of the compelling factors in that was that both the Austrian units, of course, that were up here, they were pretty much mingled in about by the village here. Both of them had the edge of the battlefield at their rear, which, in my understanding of the rules, means that if they had to retreat, they're lost. So the Prussians charged, got the grenadiers that were mingled in with them, popped the grenadiers down here for safekeeping. But both cavalry units charged. And on the morale tests that were taken, interestingly enough, this unit of the Austrians failed its morale test, so was disordered in the combat, but actually ended up winning its melee anyway. And because defending cavalry allowed to advance after combat, they've advanced to this position. And the losing Prussian cavalry has retreated all the way down here and has gone right through this lot on the way and disordered them. Okay, so it's a bit of a mess for the Prussians there. Then, surprise, surprise, the Schulenburg Dragoons, which is actually the poorest quality unit with a morale of 4, they passed their test, no problem. Everybody else passed their tests, and they fought against the Altan Dragoons of the Austrians, and they saw them off. They won the melee, and the Altan Dragoons, as we can see over here, had to retreated off the battlefield, so they're lost. So in terms of losses, the Prussians can be pleased with the result of the cavalry combat that took place there on the 2 p.m. turn. Now, as far as what's going to happen in the next turn, just finishing up there, the Schulenburg Dragoons also then, they advanced and changed their facing after the combat, and they've put themselves there because they're in a pretty desperate situation, because of course we can see that in the next turn this unit here can recover from disorder and charge them. This unit can charge them, this unit can charge them, so they're going to be in deep trouble. They can even charge them in the rear, so they'll block their rear retreat as well. But at least, they've done some service in the name of the king, and here's to it. Brave chaps. Other than that, we also, of course, have tempting targets down here for these cavalry, because if they instead recover from disorder and then charge, they could charge disordered infantry down here. So there's a tempting target for them there. We also had some long-range fire from the Prussian artillery battalion here, which was actually to no effect. And I believe that's it for the 2 p.m. turn then. So we've done, both sides have had their go, as it were. So it's the end of the 2 p.m. turn, Battle of Mollwitz, and we will move on to the Austrian 3 p.m. turn.